Nothing sells heat quite like a gun barrel that looks like it's ready to melt. The hard part is making it look like it's glowing, and not just painted red. But what if I told you it's not as hard as you might think? In this guide, I'll show you how to get results like this. The effect looks hot enough to give you third-degree burns, but the process is simple to follow and quick to pull off. By the end, your weapons will stand out with a glow that really sells the heat. Alrighty, let's get cracking. And real quick, before we start, if you're wondering about the conversion, it's just a basic Terminator kitbash. The weapon is an assault cannon with an autocannon barrel glued on, and I'll drop the rest of the bits I used in this video's description. Alrighty, we're starting with a solid black base coat. That way, the darker sections of the barrel stay strong and contrast against the heat effect later. After the black base coat, we start building up the heat. I thin down some sun red with a bit of water and paint it over the parts of the barrel where I want the heat. I also work it into these deep rings and toward the back, since later on I'll make the glow look like it's radiating out from those grooves. The very tip should stay black for now. I usually go with 2 or 3 coats. It doesn't need to be super clean, just enough to give those areas a strong red foundation. Now it's time to mark out the hottest spots and build the base for the glow. I use a slightly damp sponge with just a small amount of white ink. I dab most of the paint off first, then lightly tap it over the areas where I want the brightest orange glow to build later, leaving some of the red showing where the barrel cools off. The sponge helps keep the edges soft so the colours will blend smoothly. Where the sponge can't reach into the grooves, I switch to a brush to push the white in. A few layers later, and I've got a strong bright foundation for the heat effect. Now we shift the white into orange using Luminous orange. The goal is to create a transition from the hottest spots out towards the cooler end of the barrel. I sponge it lightly over the white and into the grooves, letting it spill a bit onto the red so it blends naturally. This paint is already very transparent, so building it up in several thin passes will give a deeper, richer glow. Now it's looking very bright, so to tone it down and bring it back into that reddish orange heat, I go in again with sun red. I use the sponge with a bit more moisture than before to thin the red closer to a glaze, so it goes on as a very thin coat. I use this where the bright orange meets cooler spots and on the raised groove rings, keeping the recesses bright. This smooths out the blends and makes the heat look more natural. When the red paint is applied over the orange, it becomes a reddish orange. This really sells the transition. Where the heat drops off, I go back in with gunmetal. I give it a light sponging of this over the cooler black areas and a bit on the sun red, so it makes it look like the barrel is starting to cool down. I use very little paint here, just enough to hint at that metallic effect showing on top. If you want to push the glow even further, you can go back in with some white, just like before, brush it onto the area you want to make brighter, then paint over that white with a luminous orange. This shifts it into a super bright orange and gives the metal a very hot, almost glowing look. And finally, I thin down some sun red and paint it around the ring near the orange glow. This makes those areas look like they're still very hot, just not as intense as the orange center. And that's how you get a gun barrel looking like it's hot enough to burn your fingers off. It's a simple process, but the effect makes a huge difference on the tabletop. If you want more step-by-step guides like this one, I've got a bunch more over on Patreon. A massive thanks to everyone already supporting me there and making it possible to create these videos. Give the video a like and sub if you found it helpful. Cheers for watching, and see you next time.